Hey guys, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to properly modify your flipping jig. There's a lot of different things you can do to modify the jig, but some cool things and little tricks that I've learned along the way that have really made it a lot easier and caught me a couple more fish. The first thing I do when I take a jig, so this jig's fresh out of the package, is I'm going to trim the skirt. So if you take a look, you can see the skirt is well beyond the hook point here, so well beyond the bend in the hook, and it's not really straight. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take it, I'm going to take a pair of scissors, and I'm really just going to trim it right in line with the hook. So I'm just taking it and I'm just cutting the skirt. The reason I like to have it nice in line with the hook is that when the fish is going to grab it, I want to make sure it's not grabbing the back end of everything, that it's really focused on the hook and the bait. It looks a little bit shorter, but I like my jig like that, a little bit shorter, a little bit more compact. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a trailer. So whether I'm using the chunk style trailer or if I'm using another kind of craw or anything else, I'm going to thread it on the hook. So sometimes I see people not thread it on the hook, but just pierce it through like this. Now that's a pretty normal way to have your jig, but for me, I don't like it that way because if I'm skipping it or if I'm moving it around, this is going to be able to slide up and down my hook. I've set the hook on some fish in the past and I've had it lined right up against it or over or rolled over the hook. You're not going to be able to get that hook in the fish. So what I'm doing is, regardless of whether it's a chunk style trailer or any other trailer, I'm going to thread it on. So again, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take it and instead of piercing it through, I'm going to thread it right along in line. That way it's on, it's in line, and I'm never going to have an issue of that rolling over top. And if I do, it might be a claw, and I know I'm going to be able to set the hook through one of the claws versus the meat of the trailer. The other thing that a lot of people will do, and I see it often, is start to trim your weed guard and try and shorten it. I've heard it a bunch of times, I've read it a bunch of places too, where you want to shorten it in line with the point of the hook. I would highly recommend against that. What you're doing when you shorten the weed guard is you're making it stiffer, which is just going to create more problems. It's going to make it harder for the fish to get that in its mouth rather than making it easier. So if I want to do anything with my weed guard at all, I'm going to fan it out a bit, make sure it's all fanned out, and then what I might do is I might take a couple of the actual the weed guard strands, take a pair of scissors, and just clip a couple of them off. So if I want to do anything with it, it's going to keep it still nice and bendy versus making it really stiff. I may actually just take a few of these strands here and trim them off. It's going to make my weed guard a little bit easier to get through, but I'm not going to shorten it and make it stiffer. Now those are some of the main modifications I'll do. So again, I've got this jig. This is basically the way I'd go out and flip it. If it's really clear water, the one thing that I do that's a little bit different is I'll also trim the top half. So you've obviously got the two halves of the skirt. So you've got the top half here that's separated by the collar, and then the bottom half. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll grab it by the actual collar here, and I'll flip it upside down so that I've got the top half of the skirt hanging down, and I'll trim that nice and close, almost in line with the actual head. So I'm just going to trim it all the way around. So now I've got kind of a finesse style jig. You can see now when I flip it over, I'm going to get a little extra flare, but it's just a little bit lower, a little bit lighter, a little bit more finesse, I guess, if I'm in a really clear water situation. So those are some things that you can do to modify your jig. Hopefully it'll get you a couple of extra bites. Keep those in mind next time you take a jig out of the package.